Colonialism didn't just take land, it stole memory, identity, and the right to tell our own story. They didn't just burn cities, they erased meaning, and nothing proves that more than the devastating looting of Benin. In the late 1800s, the British wanted to expand trade and control in the Niger Delta, especially within Benin. Benin is in the modern-day Nigeria's Edo State. It is rich in palm oil and ivory. The British tried to force the Oba of Benin to sign trade agreements, but he refused, wanting to protect his kingdom's sovereignty. In January 1897, a British delegation defied warnings and entered Benin during a sacred festival. This was a bad idea. They were ambushed and most were killed. By the time the news of the Benin massacre reached London, outrage had already turned into vengeance. The British had been humiliated, their pride and their ego was bruised, and there was only one answer: war. The fate of the Benin city was sealed. They responded with a massive military invasion called the Punitive Expedition, not just to punish the Oba, but to ensure that no African ruler ever dared challenge the British supremacy again. Benin suffered a bloody and a devastating occupation. No exact figure can be given for the number of Benin's population who were killed in the conquest of the city. However, oral and written accounts suggest that there were many casualties during the sustained fighting. Following the occupation, the Oba was captured and sent into exile, while several Benin chiefs were executed. Thousands of sacred artifacts were looted and shipped into Britain as spoils of war. And just like that, centuries of culture stolen in weeks. These stolen artifacts are what we now call the Benin bronzes, a collection of thousands of metal plaques and sculptures, primarily brass. The treasures were sold, some to private collectors and others to museums, which have displayed the artifacts for decades. A few years later, Africans began demanding what was rightfully taken from them. Pressure has continued to build up in these European and American institutions to repatriate the stolen Benin bronzes. In recent years, some of these artifacts have finally begun their journey home. In 2021, Jesus College, Cambridge returned a bronze cockerel, and Aberdeen University handed back an Oba's head. Germany followed in 2022, transferring ownership of over 1,100 items and physically returning two to Nigeria as a gesture of good faith. This move may increase pressure on other institutions to return the Benin bronzes, especially the British Museum, which has more than 900 artifacts. Yet, controversially, is legally barred from returning them due to the British Museum Act of 1963 and the Heritage Act of 1983. But let's have a look at the bigger picture. See, the Benin bronzes are just the tip of the iceberg. Thousands of African artifacts looted during the colonial invasions sit in museums across Europe and America. So we ask, how many African artifacts were stolen? And more importantly, when will they all come home? In a move to try to restore what was stolen, most African countries are now having 3D replicas in African museums, while the originals lay in American and European museums. This is an imitation of what we don't have now, and it begs the question, whose history is it anyway? Why don't we replace the 3D versions in their museums and bring the originals to us? Why should we have plagiarized versions of the original? The originals should come home and the replicas should be sent out of Africa, so that if the Americans and the Europeans want to see the originals, they should come to Africa. But why does repatriation matter? We can use them for educational purposes. It is very important these artifacts are returned so we can recreate the past for the next generation. Because if you don't see something, you're likely to forget about it. So this is more than a history lesson. It's a demand for return, for respect, and for restoration. If you're in a position of influence, speak out. If you're an institution, do what's right. And if you're African, know your story, reclaim it, and tell it loudly. Because memory matters. Heritage is not a museum display. It's the soul of a people. It's time to bring it home. All of it.